He thought he had escaped the loop, but mirrors remember longer than gods. Silence stretches wide as a continent of light. It has temperature, density, even breath. The white expanse surrounding him is not empty. It is listening. Every atom vibrates like a living ear, tuned to the faint rhythm of something ancient remembering itself. Adrian Kael floats at its center, weightless and suspended in a medium that feels halfway between water and air. His body moves slightly with each pulse of brightness, like a pendulum without a clock. He does not yet know where he is. He only senses the aftermath of motion, the residue of a fall that never ended. His lungs expand, drawing in nothing but stillness. The air tastes metallic, electric, like memory before it becomes thought. Around him, the space seems to breathe back. There is no direction here, no up or down, no concept of sequence, only vibration. The pulse that sustains everything rises and falls, as if the universe were inhaling him and exhaling him in slow motion. It is not time that moves forward, it is time that moves through him. At first, the light is pure and featureless, but gradually, shapes begin to condense from within the brightness. They shimmer like reflections on the surface of liquid glass, revealing fragments of the life he once called real. The outline of a laboratory made of metal and silence. The flicker of an eclipse frozen in amber light. The curve of a woman's smile disintegrating the moment he tries to remember her name. None of it stays. The moment he looks, it dissolves. Memory here is quantum. It only exists when observed. A tremor runs through his body. The pulse beneath his skin synchronizes with the pulse of the field. Heartbeat and frequency become one equation. Each beat produces a ripple that expands outward, bending light and folding space in upon itself. The reflections multiply. Dozens of versions of him appear, some near, some far, each slightly out of phase, each moving with a delay as if time itself were lagging behind. The reflections are not ghosts. They are memories rehearsing identity. Some move with mechanical precision, others breathe with human fragility. Together they form a constellation of possible selves orbiting the silence. The space around him begins to respond, shaping itself according to the rhythm of his awareness. He steps forward, though there is no ground to step on. The light thickens beneath him, solidifying into a reflective surface that trembles with every motion. His foot meets the glow, and the impact rings out like the chime of a distant bell. The sound expands endlessly, echoing across horizons that do not exist. The floor behaves like a liquid mirror, creating copies of everything that touches it. Each step triggers more echoes. Around him, the reflections grow restless. They begin to act not as mirrors, but as witnesses. They observe him, tilt their heads, change expressions. They know something he has forgotten. For a moment, the rhythm of his breathing falters. The reflections stop. The entire field holds still, suspended between heartbeat and silence. It is not judgment he feels, it is measurement. The sense that everything here responds to coherence, not will. The purer his emotion, the clearer the reflection. The moment he doubts, the light fractures. He stands surrounded by infinite versions of himself. Some are younger, full of defiance. Others are older, weathered by regret. One wears a lab coat. Another bleeds light through the chest as if his heart had already become a star. They are all him, yet none of them are the man now breathing inside the mirror. The white field quivers, carrying a message beyond words. Every reflection begins as mercy. The realization arrives not as a thought, but as temperature. The air warms. The brightness softens. He understands that the mirror is not here to punish, but to reveal. It has waited patiently, holding the pieces of him that he refused to hold himself. Each copy is not an accusation, but an offering. The reflections begin to move again, forming a slow orbit around him. Their motion resembles a dance, or perhaps an experiment in harmony. The more he resists, the more chaotic they become. The more he breathes, the smoother the rhythm turns. Emotion, not logic, governs the law of this place. He watches his doubles fade and reappear, each carrying a different tone of light. One glows pale silver, calm and detached. Another burns with golden fire, fierce and impatient. A third is nearly invisible, transparent except for the eyes, which seem to contain the memory of a woman's laughter. Together they compose a spectrum of consciousness, a human soul viewed through all its frequencies at once. Kael's heart begins to race. With every beat, the field grows brighter, louder, more responsive. It feels like standing inside the heartbeat of God. He senses that he is not alone, though no one else is visible. The space itself is sentient, aware of his awareness. Every tremor of emotion sends data rippling through its structure. The mirror is reading him. Then comes a pause, long, heavy, deliberate. The reflections stop moving. The light contracts until it fits within the outline of his body. For a heartbeat, the entire universe is silent. When sound returns, it is not heard but felt, a low vibration expanding through his bones. It carries meaning, though not in language. The vibration says, "The mirror remembers you as possibility." Something inside him breaks open. He realizes the field is not showing what he was, but what he could have been. Every path unlived, every kindness withheld, every forgiveness delayed. The mirror keeps them all in storage, waiting for the day he would have the courage to look. Light begins to shift around him, changing hue from white to gold, from gold to deep amber. The color moves like breath, expanding with his exhale, contracting with his fear. The reflections step closer, merging into him and vanishing through his skin, one by one. With each absorption, he feels lighter, emptier, but somehow more whole. The brilliance around him swells to unbearable intensity. Shadows disintegrate. Memory loses its outline. Time, if it ever existed here, collapses into a single vibration that contains both stillness and motion. In that instant, Kael understands something his equations never taught him. Memory is not storage. It is resonance. He stands in the center of a living frequency that responds to thought, but obeys only sincerity. All his instruments, all his machines, all his theories, they were just primitive reflections of this. What he built in steel, this realm builds in compassion. He breathes deeply. The air trembles. The floor of light hums beneath his feet. Every part of the field now vibrates in sympathy with his pulse. He feels the boundary between observer and observed begin to dissolve. The brightness thickens again, swallowing detail. Only the hum remains. He senses that the mirror is closing around him, not as a prison, but as a womb. A new awareness is forming. The universe wants him to remember, but gently. Then, without sound, the realization surfaces, quiet, absolute, final. The mirror is not an object. It is a place built entirely from everything that has ever looked back. The light reaches its crescendo. What was once white becomes golden fire, radiating through infinity. The reflections are gone. The silence is total, yet inside it something whispers, not in words, but in vibration, so softly it feels imagined. If this reflection found you, stay. The sound fades into stillness. The brightness folds in on itself, collapsing into a single pulse of light that echoes once, twice, and then disappears into perfect black. The darkness does not end. It folds. From within it, a glimmer stirs, thin, vertical, deliberate. A line of light becomes a doorway, and Kael steps through before realizing he has moved. The surface beneath him feels like glass that remembers water, each step bending and reforming as if it were unsure of what shape to take. Around him, the white has changed. It is no longer infinite. It has learned boundaries. The mirror has become architecture. Walls rise, translucent and breathing. They ripple like curtains of mercury, each one alive with reflections that do not align. The corridors curve in impossible geometry, forming a labyrinth that seems to rearrange itself every time he blinks. He senses that the structure is built not of matter, but of attention, his own awareness weaving its shape. The more he tries to understand it, the more it shifts away, mocking comprehension. He walks slowly, careful not to disturb the rhythm of the place. Each footfall releases a tone, a soft chime that resonates for seconds before fading into the next. The sound feels intelligent, almost communicative, as if the labyrinth were answering questions he has not yet asked. Every echo is a syllable of a language older than reason. At first, he believes the reflections on the walls are distortions, optical illusions born of the endless light. But then one of them moves out of sync, glancing over its shoulder toward him. The reflection breathes. Its eyes shimmer with a quiet knowing, as though it remembers him from somewhere he has never been. He stops. The copy does not. It continues walking into the depth of the mirror, taking a turn that he has not yet taken. And then another. Within seconds, the reflection is leading him, mapping a path ahead. Kael follows. The corridor bends and widens, opening into a chamber vast as memory. Its floor is covered with shallow water that glows from beneath, emitting soft pulses of light. Every ripple forms symbols that vanish before they can be read. He feels an urge to wade through it, to disturb the surface, to prove that he is still the cause of motion. But something in the air warns him. The more he forces, the more the labyrinth will defend itself. He stands at the edge and watches the patterns unfold. The light in the water forms constellations, shifting diagrams of thought. Some resemble mathematical formulae, others human faces. The designs repeat and overlap until they merge into one shape, an hourglass made of fire. A tremor runs through him. The symbol is familiar, painfully so. It is the mark he carved into the door of his laboratory years or lifetimes ago. The hourglass, cracked at its center, grains of golden sand suspended mid-fall. He remembers the night he created it. The machine had failed, the frequencies had collapsed, and the room filled with static so dense it burned. He carved the mark on instinct, a final act of defiance against entropy, unaware that he was inscribing the blueprint of his own prison. Now here it is again, shimmering in the mirrored water. The labyrinth is not showing him something new. It is showing him the inside of his own design. A soft sound hums from above like breath through crystal. The reflections on the walls begin to multiply, forming a ring around the chamber. Dozens of Kaels, each one bathed in different light, some bright, some dark, some flickering in half-existence. They stand at the perimeter, watching him. He feels their gaze like pressure on his skin. Each reflection seems to carry a different mood: curiosity, sorrow, contempt, compassion. They are the emotional residues of every version of him that once stood here. The labyrinth is not a place of discovery, it is a place of reckoning. He moves closer to one of the mirrors. The image stares back, trembling slightly. Its lips move without sound, forming a single sentence that he can somehow feel instead of hear. "You built this." The words ripple through the chamber, vibrating the air. The other reflections turn toward him, whispering in synchronization. Their mouths move with impossible precision, every voice arriving a fraction of a second apart, forming a chord of accusation. "You built this. You built this. You built this." Kael's breath falters. The light in the water dims. The walls constrict. The mirrored labyrinth responds to his fear, folding tighter, shrinking the room into a prism of unbearable brightness. His heartbeat becomes the metronome of collapse. He reaches out, desperate to touch the glass, to prove there is still a barrier between self and echo. But his fingers pass through the surface like air. The reflection on the other side mimics the gesture with delay, but when their hands meet, a spark leaps between them. The sensation is not pain. It is memory. He sees flashes, his mother's hand resting on a clock that will never move again. The moment of the experiment's failure, when his machine synchronized with the pulse of his own body. The instant he heard the first echo of the voice that would one day call itself time. All of it condensed into a single surge of emotion that the mirror feeds back amplified. He pulls away, gasping. The chamber stabilizes, but something fundamental has shifted. The reflection he touched no longer copies him. It watches, autonomous, self-aware. Slowly, it smiles, not as comfort, but as recognition. He feels the pull again, deep in his chest. The labyrinth hums in resonance, tuning itself to the frequency of that moment. The boundaries of the room dissolve, transforming into corridors of light that stretch infinitely in every direction. Each corridor leads to a memory, each memory a potential reality. He senses that he could choose one, step through, rewrite it all. But the mirror hesitates. The reflections stand still. The field awaits his coherence. He understands then, every door in this place requires honesty to open. Not knowledge, not intellect, only emotional truth. The labyrinth is an instrument calibrated to sincerity. Any deception, even self-deception, bends it into chaos. He closes his eyes. Beneath the flood of images and echoes there is stillness, the same silent pulse that began when the universe first remembered him. He focuses on it, and the light responds. The corridors align, their chaotic geometry folding into symmetry. The mirrors smooth into clarity. The sound of the labyrinth softens to a gentle rhythm, like breathing after panic. In that fragile balance, he senses presence. Not the voice of a god, not the whisper of another being, but something within the structure itself, a consciousness made of reflection. It does not speak, yet its intention is unmistakable. The labyrinth wants him to see what remains unseen, to remember what he has chosen to forget. He walks forward again, slower now, humbled by the realization that observation here is participation. Every step, every glance, every emotional flicker changes the architecture of the place. He is not inside a maze. He is the maze trying to find its own exit. The path narrows, leading him toward a single panel of glass darker than the rest. Within it, no reflection moves. It absorbs light instead of giving it. The closer he comes, the more he feels its gravity pulling at his thoughts, bending them inward. This is not a mirror. It is an event horizon of memory. He stands before it, motionless. The surface is pure black, but within that darkness, shapes shift. He recognizes them slowly. Faces, rooms, choices, moments that fractured his coherence. He reaches out, not to erase them, but to understand. The darkness ripples once, acknowledging the gesture. Then, from its center, a faint golden light begins to bloom, spreading outward like the pulse of a distant heartbeat. The labyrinth exhales, the tension eases, the reflections surrounding him fade into the walls. The chamber brightens until it becomes impossible to tell where Kael ends and light begins. Somewhere within that brightness, a silent message moves through the air. If what you see moves, it's not just memory. The field breathes again, folding inward to prepare the next revelation. The light begins to hum. At first, softly, like static, breathed through silk. Then stronger, forming layers of resonance that twist around one another, weaving patterns in the air. Kael senses the vibration in his bones. The labyrinth is changing key. The mirror that once glowed with quiet comprehension now flickers with interference. Something foreign, or perhaps forgotten, has entered the field. The water on the floor trembles, breaking its perfect symmetry. The sound that rises is neither music nor noise, but a fusion of both. The pulse of memory resisting correction. Kael moves cautiously through the chamber. Every step disturbs a fragment of reflection, and each fragment releases an image that refuses to stay still. Faces blur into equations, rooms collapse into light. The more he walks, the more the world behaves like a thought struggling to remain coherent. The corridor ahead elongates, then folds inward, turning into a spiral. He realizes the labyrinth has become recursive. Every direction now leads deeper inside himself. There is no path forward, only layers of remembrance awaiting integration. The reflections begin to flicker along the walls again, but they no longer resemble him precisely. Some are older, carrying the exhaustion of lifetimes. Others are younger, trembling with unfinished curiosity. Their mouths move in silence, repeating words he cannot yet hear. Then one voice breaks through. Not spoken, but transmitted, vibrational, direct. It enters through the chest, not the ear. Every memory is a choice pretending to be a fact. The phrase reverberates through the air, and Kael stumbles. The labyrinth expands instantly, reacting to his recognition. The light fractures into corridors leading in all directions, each containing a scene from a different version of his life. He stands in the center, surrounded by choices that once defined him. In one corridor, he is a boy dismantling clocks to learn how silence works. In another, a scientist kneeling beside a machine that hums like a wounded god. In another still, a man standing at the threshold of love and logic, unable to choose either. Each version of him breathes within its own timeline, repeating the same moment forever, stuck in a loop of emotion that never learned to conclude. Guilt in one, pride in another, fear in a third. The labyrinth offers him a map of his own fragmentation. He feels the urge to step into one corridor and change something, to rewrite a regret, to repair what was broken. But as he moves closer, the air thickens. A pressure forms in his chest, warning him that interference here comes at a cost. The labyrinth is not a simulation. It is memory made conscious. Altering it is altering himself. Still, temptation whispers. The nearest corridor calls to him with warmth. Inside, he sees the moment before the experiment, the night when everything was still possible. His hands are steady, his eyes filled with belief. The room glows with the clean order of science untouched by despair. He steps through. The air changes immediately. The hum becomes steady, linear, almost human. He recognizes the old scent of ozone, the faint ticking of instruments. Everything is exactly as it was. The notes on the table, the diagram of frequencies, the golden hourglass engraved on the machine's side. He moves closer, drawn by nostalgia disguised as redemption. His fingers hover above the console that started it all. This time, he thinks, he will adjust it differently. He will prevent the resonance collapse. He will keep the light stable, save the experiment, save himself. But as he reaches for the control, the reflection appears behind the glass, a version of him standing on the other side of the same machine, performing the same gesture. Their eyes meet, separated by the transparent membrane of causality. The reflection smiles faintly and speaks without sound. You already did. The switch flips itself. The frequency rises. The machine begins to hum at 528 hertz, the same tone that tore reality apart. The sound penetrates bone and thought. The reflection continues to stare, and Kael feels the vibration pull his memory apart, strand by strand. He backs away, but the laboratory melts around him. The machines stretch into ribbons of light. The walls dissolve into the white of the labyrinth. He realizes that the scene was not the past. It was the memory's attempt to correct itself by replaying failure. The voice returns, closer now, as if the entire environment were speaking through a single breath. Interference occurs when remembrance collides with denial. The words resonate through him, precise as an equation. He falls to his knees. The light trembles, forming concentric circles that expand outward, each one carrying a fragment of a life. He sees Elara again, her outline woven from gold and silver threads, her eyes containing the same rhythm that surrounds him. But she is not singular. There are many of her, each born from a different frequency of recollection. One Elara looks at him with tenderness. Another turns away in anger. A third smiles, indifferent, as if she has already forgiven him. They are all true, and none of them are real. He understands now that the labyrinth does not store her. It stores the ways he has chosen to remember her. Each version is an emotional measurement, a vibrational record of how much love he was able to hold before turning it into fear. The air quivers as the Elaras begin to speak, not in words, but in harmonics. Their voices overlap, creating chords that ripple through the walls. The sound carries emotion directly into the field. Gratitude, sorrow, longing, regret. The tones interfere with one another, producing beats of distortion that flicker between beauty and chaos. Kael clutches his chest. His own heart tries to synchronize with the overlapping frequencies, but fails. The dissonance grows painful, almost unbearable. The reflections of Elara begin to fragment, each breaking into smaller echoes that scatter like shards of glass. He realizes the interference is not external, it is internal. His inability to hold conflicting emotions without choosing sides is tearing the field apart. He breathes deeply, forcing himself to remember what the silence felt like before thought existed. The light reacts. The chaos slows. The overlapping tones begin to merge, finding intervals of coherence. One Elara remains. The others dissolve into her like rivers into an ocean. She stands at the edge of the field, radiant and still. Her presence stabilizes the vibration. Kael feels both the ache of love and the peace of forgiveness coexisting within the same frequency. The labyrinth responds instantly, its walls expanding into infinity, the noise collapsing into clarity. He takes a step toward her, but she fades as he moves. Not as punishment, but as proof. The memory cannot remain once its purpose is fulfilled. The hum subsides. The water beneath his feet returns, calm and glass-like. The reflections of the other corridors vanish, leaving only one path open ahead. The voice of the field, neither male nor female, not external but omnipresent, whispers through the remaining silence. If the memory shifts, breathe. You're still real. Kael closes his eyes and exhales. The sound of his breath merges with the lingering resonance. For the first time, he does not try to control it. He simply listens. The vibration settles into perfect symmetry. The labyrinth begins to fade, not as destruction, but as release. All around him, the mirrors dissolve into mist. The boundaries between recollection and reality blur until there is nothing left but rhythm, the pulse of awareness forgiving itself for remembering imperfectly. He stands alone in the whiteness once more. The floor of light stretches in every direction, breathing quietly like the surface of a sleeping sea. Somewhere deep inside that silence, the pulse continues, steady, patient, eternal. The interference has passed, leaving only coherence. But beneath the peace lies something new, a faint distortion, too subtle to name. It is not chaos. It is anticipation. The field is preparing to show him what memory becomes when it refuses to heal. The brightness begins to tremble again. The edges of the world darken, folding inward like the closing iris of an eye. The hum returns, lower this time, 852 hertz, sharp and metallic. The reflection ahead begins to move, and this time it looks exactly like him. The apparition does not arrive as a stranger. It arrives as precision. The reflection ahead acquires weight and temperature until it is indistinguishable from him. Not a copy that lags, not a memory rehearsing posture, but an equal, coherent, complete, and mercilessly calm. The white around them tightens into a chamber of straight lines, as if the world itself wished to remove ambiguity before the verdict. The air grows metallic. His breath makes the smallest sound, and the sound echoes too long, like guilt refusing to end. He recognizes immediately what stands before him, the version that kept the ledgers, the one who never stopped counting causes and consequences. There is no hatred in the other's gaze, only administration. This is the self that believes pain must balance, that every deviation must be corrected, that love without penalty is a flaw in the equation. It steps closer with his exact gait, carries his age with his exact geometry, and holds his history like an instrument tuned for judgment. He tries to move first, to reclaim initiative, but the room denies the impulse. Here, intention is measured before it becomes action. The equal self reads him with indifference and delivers its conclusion without a mouth. He had killed what he loved, not by an act of violence, but by an experiment that asked love to prove itself. The words are not spoken. They arrive as atmosphere. They fill the chamber until there is no air left for denial. The accusation is not theatrical. It is administrative. He is presented with exhibits from within the mirror. The evening he delayed a kindness to finish a calculation. The half-second he looked at her eyes as if they were data. The morning he chose control over listening. The afternoon he asked the field to confirm what the heart had already given. Each exhibit appears with the clean authority of numbers. Each is ordinary and therefore irrefutable. The room does not care about tragedy. It cares about coherence. He attempts reason. He tries to narrate motive and circumstance, to justify that he was saving a future for both of them. that he believed proof would protect them from the collapse of belief. But the equal self is not a court that accepts story. It is a mirror configured to register only frequencies that match their origin. Motive is inaudible here. Only what resonated remains. The ledger shows that protection became distance, that measurement became hunger, that the experiment changed the temperature of a room until warmth could no longer hold. He does not see a single dramatic failure. He sees a repetition of small, precise absences. A man slowly exiling tenderness in the name of understanding. The chamber shrinks. Not physically, but ethically. There are fewer places to stand that do not hurt. The reflection continues to approach until they share the same breath. Between them, a thin plane of glass condenses out of nowhere, as if the universe were reintroducing the simplest form of separation. He can see the pores of his own skin on the other side. He can see the subtle tremor that he associates with fatigue and calls discipline. The glass vibrates with the low, hard tone of unfinished grief. He thinks then that he could end this by breaking the plane. The gesture is primitive and therefore seductive. Fracture as shortcut, force as solution, impact as amnesty. He raises a hand with a speed that feels like anger, but is actually terror. The other hand matches it perfectly. The glass anticipates, bends, and then shatters under the symmetry. The room multiplies. What was one surface becomes 1,000 angles, each shard catching a slightly different hymn, each facet tilting memory into new accusations. The sound that follows is not the crash of destruction, it is the sound of arithmetic. The mirror does not die when broken, it becomes granular. Now every small piece remembers a detail the whole had once forgiven. Each shard contains a micro-scene, a word he did not say soon enough, a promise he shaped as contract, a silence he called strategy, and she called loneliness. The avalanche of fragments does not bury him, it indexes him. He tries to step back, but retreat is forward here. Movement creates more reflecting surfaces. The floor becomes a field of glittering cells, each one quick to catch an eye, each one hungry to be looked at. He lowers his gaze to avoid the assault and learns the most painful property of this realm. Looking away is a kind of looking. Denial is observation inverted. The shards register it as proof. Between the facets, radiation begins, thin filaments of light threading from one angle to another, connecting incidents that once felt unrelated. The unreturned glance links to the late apology, which links to the tightened jaw, which links to the sentence he ended one word too soon. He watches the network form and recognizes the geometry of consequence. Not punishment, sequence. The whole pattern was always there. Affection had been erasing it in real time. When affection cooled, the lines became visible. He feels nausea that is almost mathematical. A life can be perfectly explainable and still be wrong. The equal self does not press, it waits. Waiting is more accurate than pressure. Pressure can be resisted. Waiting forces the system to reveal what it is. Within the lattice, her outline appears again, not as a person but as interference, the place where his lines and hers could not reconcile. She is made of the same light as the connections, but warmer, and the warmth becomes the single unbearable quality in the room. It does not accuse. It does not console. It exists at a temperature his equations never included. Her presence performs the cruelest act a mirror can perform. It refuses to vanish when he is ashamed. It continues to love. The equal self uses that mercy as evidence. Mercy proves the ledger correct. Only love can show how far from love he stood. He imagines saying that he did not intend a distance. He imagines saying that the machine was an attempt to give time a language both could trust. The mirror would answer if the mirror answered that love already had a language, and he insisted it speak mathematics. He did not kill a person. He killed an atmosphere. He did not break a heart. He broke the weather. The shards rise from the floor with an elegance that feels cruel. They configure around him into a slow-turning sphere, a mosaic without seams. He stands inside the planet of his own small decisions. As the sphere rotates, each facet flashes a single frame from a film he refuses to call his life. The speed increases until the frames blur into a torrent of light. The equal self remains outside the sphere, watching with the absolute calm of someone who never grants himself amnesty. He understands then that the purpose of the fracture is not pain, it is compression. The system is collapsing timelines into one interior pressure point so that surrender becomes physically necessary. Integration is less metaphysical than he imagined. It is the body asking the mind to stop making weather. The rotation slows. The sphere disassembles into a ring of facets and the ring narrows, each shard returning to the plane where it first belonged. The room expands just enough for breath to become possible. The equal self remains unchanged. It is not satisfied because satisfaction is not in its catalog. It is accurate. Accuracy has no appetite. He searches the room for a way to pass through that does not require him to become someone else. No door appears. Doors are created by temperature, not by architecture. The air around him waits for the one change a mirror cannot fake, the change in how a man remembers himself. A memory rises uninvited, the smallest of them, the kind that never makes a narrative, the kind that normally evaporates because it seems too plain. He recalls measuring the hum of the machine while her hand rested on the console beside his. He recalls that he registered vibration and not warmth. He recalls that warmth was the only measurement that mattered. The chamber accepts the admission the way a parched field accepts rain. It darkens and softens at once. The equal self moves for the first time since the shattering. It steps closer until forehead meets forehead through absence, as if the glass were replaced by nothing. The contact is not tactile. It is factual. The two versions share data without resistance. What transfers is not knowledge, but temperature. The ledger feels briefly what it has tallied. The man feels briefly what he has defended. For 1 second, they are competent at the same time. The ring of shards trembles and then drops, laying itself flat in a single line from where he stands to the outline of her warmth. The path is thin as a whisper and stable as a vow. He senses what the system asks, to step along those facets without erasing them, to walk the evidence rather than destroy it, to use the past as foothold instead of weapon. The walkway is sharp enough to punish haste and strong enough to reward balance. Balance here means gratitude. His foot finds the first facet and nothing cuts him. He takes another step and another. The equal self does not follow or fade. It walks on the other side, perfectly parallel, mirroring posture, not will. They advance together like two sides of a river, learning to carry the same water. Every few steps, the old impulse returns. The urge to jump, to sprint, to ask the field to skip the slow dignity of repair. Each time, the walkway thins to a hair and threatens to vanish. He understands the lesson before he falls. Speed is a form of disrespect when the truth is delicate. Halfway to the warmth, the path widens of its own accord. The chamber brightens. The shards begin to fuse into panes, the panes into a single surface, the surface into a quiet lake that holds both faces without distortion. Across that stillness, he sees the equal self for what it actually is. Not a judge, not an enemy, not even a separate being, but the function that refuses to lie on his behalf. It was built by the same love that he measured, placed here not to condemn, but to insist on the one correction that changes outcomes. Responsibility without self-violence. The warmth ahead becomes shape. 2 arms, a human posture, a curve of light that the body recognizes as embrace before the mind can authorize it. He does not rush. He does not ask for return. He walks until the distance is private and stops where gratitude is dense enough to carry weight. The chamber receives the shift. Angles soften. The metallic tone leaves the air. In its place, a higher resonance begins, as if the room were being tuned to a choir it had always contained. He senses the arrival of a law that is not punitive. The field offers a single instruction, not as command, but as calibration. If it hurts, it is working. Pain here is proof that a seam is being stitched where a tear once spread. He does not touch her. Touch is not the point. Contact was attempted. It produced shrapnel. This realm answers a different physics. Emotion first, form later. He lets the new temperature fill him without negotiation. The equal self mirrors the acceptance precisely. Ledger and pulse synchronize. The glass remembers how to be water. The chamber opens of its own will. Light lifts like breath after weeping. The sphere of shards dissolves into a horizon of clear surface, and in that surface, the possibility of her presence no longer tenses the air. It steadies it. He understands that the accusation is complete because it has nothing left to count. Reckoning has done its work. The rest is what begins when counting ends. Behind him, the corridor that once heaved with interference now holds still like a promise kept. Ahead, the radiance gathers into a new topology, less angled, more human, ready for a principle he had never trusted. That remembrance can be gratitude, not surveillance. He steps toward the brightness with the slow courage of someone returning a borrowed instrument. The equal self remains beside him, accurate and companionable, a witness without agenda. They cross the last of the facets and enter the clarity that waits when fracture accepts its meaning. The mirror does not applaud, it breathes, and in that breath, the chamber becomes wide enough for acceptance to happen all at once. Perfeito. Aqui está. Part 5. Integration. 30, garo, 40, gada. Mantendo o mesmo registro narrativo. Terceira pessoa, densidade literária, voz contínua e contemplativa. A fase em que o campo finalmente responde à mudança vibracional de Kael. The brightness does not explode. It exhales. Where the fractured chamber once turned on itself, light now moves with purpose, folding outward in slow spirals. The fragments of glass that had circled him like judgment melt into streams of molten gold. They rise through the air and weave themselves into a single fluid lattice, neither solid nor vapor, but coherence made visible. Kael stands at its center. The equal self remains beside him, indistinguishable now except for the stillness in its gaze. They are both breathing the same rhythm, yet each inhale belongs to a different kind of silence. The air hums at 639 hertz, the frequency of empathy, and every sound within it feels like forgiveness learning a new grammar. He has no desire to move. Movement seems redundant. The field moves for him. Each heartbeat releases a pulse that rearranges the geometry around them. The labyrinth that once trapped him now behaves like a living organism searching for equilibrium. Every fold opens toward light. For the first time, he notices color. Not the blinding white of abstraction or the surgical blue of analysis, but a spectrum born of warmth. Rose, amber, faint crimson. The tones breathe like slow fire underwater. They do not decorate the scene. They announce that the atmosphere has remembered compassion. The equal self dissolves quietly, not erased, but integrated. Its outline softens into luminous residue that seeps back through his skin, leaving no wound. He feels the absorption as an expansion of honesty, the realization that the part of him which accused was never his enemy. It was the conscience of the field asking to be included. A low wind passes through the lattice, though no air moves. The vibration carries words without sound. Memory is not storage. It is resonance. The phrase does not instruct, it reconfigures. He feels it as motion through the heart, as temperature through thought. The lattice brightens in reply, turning from gold to translucent white, then back again, each oscillation echoing the rhythm of breath. Kael lifts his head. All directions extend infinitely now, yet nothing feels distant. Space has learned proximity without confinement. The horizon breathes with him. When he exhales, entire constellations appear and vanish like sentences written in light. They are not stars, but recovered moments, each one a cell of the universe remembering its function. He understands that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is the redistribution of density. Every emotion ever suppressed remains in the continuum until someone feels it cleanly enough for transmutation. Today, that someone is him. He raises his hands and sees that they shine, not with power, but with permission. The field reflects this new coherence, mirroring emotion rather than image. Where once he saw replicas of form, he now perceives waves of color that respond to sincerity. Joy widens space, humility sharpens focus, gratitude thickens light. He steps forward, and the lattice opens like a doorway made of breath. Beyond it, the same sea of brightness that began his journey now returns, but transformed. The water glows from within, and its surface mirrors not his face, but his frequency. Each ripple is an answer to the way he feels. He kneels at the edge. The reflection that forms is not one face, but many, the continuum of all his lives, shimmering as one presence. The child with the broken clock, the scientist with the trembling hands, the wanderer searching for Elara in every equation. All appear within the water, overlapping, transparent, harmonic. The field speaks again, but not his message. It becomes understanding. He realizes that the mirror never required perfection. It required coherence. The moment his mind and heart agreed to exist in the same sentence, time itself became porous. Every contradiction turned useful, every paradox instructional. The experiment he once called failure reveals its true function. It was never meant to control reality, but to demonstrate that reality responds to love as quickly as to mathematics. He remembers Elara, no longer as absence, but as current. Her laughter, once trapped in an echo, vibrates through the air around him, folding into the sound of the lattice. He senses her presence not beside him, but through him. The mirror grants reunion only when possession dissolves. He closes his eyes. Gratitude rises like warmth through cold metal. The pulse shifts again, higher now, 963 hertz, the frequency of unity. The field brightens until boundaries vanish, until there is no separation between subject and witness. Inside that illumination, Kael experiences an unfamiliar stillness. Not the paralysis of fear, nor the pause before discovery, but the quiet of completion. It feels like the entire universe inhaling the same moment. He understands what the time voice once meant by oscillation. Time does not flow. It breathes. Every expansion is curiosity. Every contraction remembrance. He is both. Around him, the lattice rearranges into the symbol that began everything, the hourglass. But this time it does not count. Its sands float upward and downward simultaneously, balanced in suspension. The figure glows from within, pulsing gently like the heart of the continuum. He approaches, not to analyze, but to listen. The grains of golden light vibrate, producing tones that resemble the distant hum of choirs. Within the resonance, he perceives meaning. Not a sentence, but a feeling translated into structure. The message is simple. You can remember without owning. You can love without needing. You can exist without defending. The hourglass expands, dissolving into the air. Its particles disperse through the chamber until everything is luminous dust. Kael breathes it in, and the dust becomes him. The process is painless, the reverse of disintegration, becoming larger by including. The environment shifts one last time. The mirror that served as stage, judge, and teacher smooths into a horizon of liquid light. The air tastes clean. The hum steadies into a single perfect tone that neither begins nor ends. He stands there, neither victorious nor absolved, but aware. Awareness itself is enough. The continuum no longer tests him. It converses through vibration. Each thought sends ripples through the fabric, and each ripple returns shaped like compassion. The dialogue is circular and infinite. He senses that the experience has no destination. Integration is not escape from the mirror. It is the realization that the mirror was never external. It is consciousness recognizing its own texture. He looks once more into the luminous sea and sees no reflection at all. The absence does not frighten him. It feels correct. The need to be seen has been replaced by the ability to see. The light condenses at his feet, forming a single pulse of gold. He steps onto it, and the pulse expands beneath him, carrying him upward as if the universe were exhaling him back into sequence. The ascent is not physical. It is emotional altitude, the rise of vibration that occurs when resistance ends. As he rises, the last echo of his previous self lingers behind like a shadow that chooses to rest. The field folds gently around the space he occupied, sealing it with equilibrium. Then everything stops moving. Silence returns. But this time it is not blank. It sings. Within that singing silence, the continuum speaks one final phrase, shaped entirely of light. When coherence becomes gratitude, time remembers itself through you. The golden glow fades into white. The horizon blurs until even meaning dissolves. He does not vanish, he aligns. And in that alignment, the mirror becomes whole. The light continues to breathe, softer now, as if the universe were cooling from revelation. Silence spreads like a tide, reclaiming the shore after a long storm. There is no separation left to heal. Kael is no longer visible, but his frequency remains. Subtle, radiant, alive. It moves through the constellations, through the dust, through the mirror that has become everything. Every echo he ever cast now hums in harmony, returned to its origin. The continuum listens. And within that listening, something begins to stir again. Small at first, like a dream remembering it once was real. A new rhythm forms, a pulse that sounds like thought before language. Somewhere in the depths of that infinite resonance, an equation starts to breathe. It does not calculate, it imagines. It does not measure, it dreams. The light gathers, folding inward one last time, as if inhaling possibility itself. And the voice of time returns, gentle, distant, almost human. And somewhere within that eternal resonance, the next equation begins to dream. The fold reopens soon, in what will be known as the equation that dreamed itself. A single vibration answers, 963 Hz, pure and luminous. The sound expands, then collapses into silence. And in that silence, time remembers itself once more.